on, thanks. So today I will try to give some insight into how defining goals in nature-based solutions. We'll explore key aspects to consider and how a well-defined traceable goal can support your project, both in execution and in management, as well as positioning it within a broader framework, such as policy development, regional planning, and even national objectives. In other words, how goals can help in upscaling nature-based solutions. So why goals matter? This may be quite obvious. Still, it's good to keep in mind that if you have a clear defined goal, it can help provide direction and clarity so everyone understands the project objectives and reducing confusion and enabling better decision making. It enables effective planning, so clear goals support task distribution, scheduling, and deadline setting. It can optimize your resource use. So if you have to choose, your goal can help in defining, okay, time, money, people, how do we use these efficiently? It can improve collaboration, shared objectives, reduce misunderstanding, and clarifies roles. It can monitor the progress and success of your project. Clear goals can help measure the outcome and determine if a project is on track. Finally, and maybe most importantly, it can increase the motivation and engagement around a project with people who are engaged, are motivated towards getting towards a certain goal. A project can become really successful, and in a larger context, it can really help in community support. It can help in showing the larger purpose and the commitment for a project. So when we're talking about goals, usually what you see is the obvious, the SMART concept. I think this is known throughout, that your goals should be specific, they should be measurable, they should be, well, the A stands for a lot of different things, but acceptable, achievable, attainable, you name it. It should be relevant and realistic, and it should be timed. However, the concept of specific, oh yeah, now we're good. This concept of specific becomes quite difficult when dealing with complex natural systems. Nature is not binary and it's dynamic, it's full of variability, and translating this richness into operational goals, well, it demands nuance and flexibility. And we've all known the discussion on biodiversity, because what do we measure? We've had this discussion within our ResiRiver project, because what do you measure? The amount of species? Just the mammals? Just the vertebrates? A biomass? Do you measure habitats, natural processes? Within an ecosystem, they are all relevant, but how do we define what we want to achieve? This is difficult. So we're going back to school, and because when we look at an ecosystem and try to describe an ecosystem, this is a picture you see in a lot of schools, and it comes back that an ecosystem can be viewed and described on multiple levels, and this corresponds with your goal setting. So you can look at an ecosystem from an organism point of view, just one organism, a group of organisms, a population of organisms. You can look at the community as a whole, at an ecosystem, and even on a biosphere level, you can describe the natural system. And similarly, your goals should be defined across spatial and operational levels. So this will be my plea for today, and hopefully this can help you, that maybe this can help you in setting the goals or defining extra goals for your project. Because I would say it is important for a project to have goals on multiple levels. So you need, from a large scale to a small scale, you need different kind of goals that are in connection with each other. A national policy might speak of climate resilient river systems, while an implementation team needs to determine how wide a channel should be or how deep a floodplain should be excavated. Thus, goals should be formulated on both a strategic as well as a technical level, meanwhile ensuring the cohesion between your vision and the execution of your project. So I hope this is clear, but you can see here, you want climate resilient river systems for country as a whole, but this means you want gradual transitions between land and water. But in the end, for an operational team, this means I need a flow velocity of 0.5 meter per second. For example, further on the presentation, I will dive deeper into this based on a case study. But when you have these more traceable and transparent descriptions of your project, they can result in a stronger fundament for your project. And they can align the broad ambitions with practical design needs. So you can use this as a, I'm sorry, my cat interrupts. So, to continue. You can, I try to define this in 4 different levels for goal setting that you could use. So more on a vision, is more on a national or regional level, depending how big the area is. For the Netherlands, we'll use a national level, probably. Maybe for France, it's more of a regional level, even though the square space is probably more or less the same. You've got your main goals. These are on a regional, maybe even a local level. You've got measure-specific goals, and you've got operational goals. I'll dive deeper into this further on in the presentation, so it becomes more clear what I mean. So linking your local actions to national objectives can help. They help in, so goal setting becomes even more powerful when local objectives align with a broader policy and a broader framework. When stakeholders can see how their local project contributes to a national biodiversity or water management goals, they can be more active, more motivated to act. So this is really, the broad goals should help in a public buy-in. However, this also means that they should be quite generic, because everybody more or less should agree with them. They shouldn't be too controversial. However, they need to be translated into actionable targets that account for local differences, and the specific goals should have a measurable impact. This also helps within stakeholder management. You can explain why a certain measurement has to be taken here and not somewhere else, why this area is of extra importance, and how it contributes to the broader ecological goals. So how this specific site is contributing to ecological goals over a whole system or a whole regional network. And this will help in the understanding that I'm doing something, but my neighbor's doing something as well, and we're all working towards a common goal. I think the free-flowing rivers with the fish migration has been really helpful in showing something like this. We want free-flowing rivers and free fish migration through all of Europe, and the program showed that you have all kinds of fish migration measurements throughout of Europe, so everybody sees I'm doing my small part of the whole puzzle. And what is really helpful in great goal setting is that it can help you navigate trade-offs, especially in a crowded landscape. In densely populated regions like the Netherlands, natural systems compete with multiple human uses. So you have shipping, you have agriculture, you have freshwater supply, you have recreation, heritage, well, you name it, etc. And reaching a good outcome often requires trade-offs. In Dutch planning culture, we refer to this as polderen. I compromise a little bit, you compromise a little bit, and we come to an agreeable solution for everybody. When you have clear and well-structured goals, they can help you in making informed compromises. You know what part of your goal you might not achieve when compromising on a certain aspect, and it may be and it helps by making explicit what you want to achieve and what trade-offs are acceptable. I will illustrate this further in the case study, but it can also help in making informed decisions and not arbitrary decisions. Finally, nice goals can help in celebrating achievements. You have to celebrate your successes. This also helps in showing and in getting more support for more projects to come. So broad inspirational goals can help to secure support, but specific goals demonstrate the impact and the success of those broader goals. So they are essential for long-term programs to show your success on a smaller timescale and validate that longer programs that needs continual support. And they are, you can celebrate your success right after implementation, and you can say, well, a certain species can return in this area. We've made everything wonderfully optimal for it, and once the species has returned, you can, and monitoring confirms it, you can celebrate the success again. So this can help in inspiring and validating and sharing your successes. So looking back at your goals can help in celebrate, okay, what was our initial goal and what did we want to achieve, and are we achieving this really? So you can get a great success story. Now, it's still quite conceptual, so let's dive into some case studies. I will use the programmatic approach for the large water systems of the Netherlands. The PAGW, Gelder Support, is also part of that program. And the Gelder Support as a case study, and for a part of this, and for the end, I will use the Water Framework Directive measures that we're taking in the Netherlands to show the more operational goals, as we're not on that point with our project yet. Let's see, vision. So on a national level, Gelder Support is part of the programmatic approach to large waters. And its national objective states that it is to improve ecological conditions in large water systems, making ecosystems more resilient and adaptive to climate change while preserving and increasing economic and social value. Wonderful generic goal, isn't it? Well, that's the whole idea, right? Because you need to get policymakers to agree with it. It shouldn't be too controversial. Everybody should think, yeah, well, that's a good idea. Let's go for that. So this is in order to get support on the national level. On a national level, thankfully, we made this a little bit better, more specific, and we said we want dynamic processes. We're going to focus on dynamic processes. So what kind of processes are inherent to the ecosystem, like tides and floods and movements of sand, all these kinds of processes. So we're focusing on returning that. We're focusing on increasing habitat size, and we're focusing on connectivity for organisms, but also again for water flow, and with ecosystems and habitats to increase the connectivity between those. Keep this in mind, because these will return. Specifically, the vision is we further elaborated on the national objective. So we want to increase the food web with more exchange of fresh and salt water, sediments, nutrients, and organisms with one another, a broader view of the food web. And really important in the whole is that there must be room to absorb changes that can temporarily strain the ecosystem so that it can recover afterwards. And again, this is really important for policymakers, but on a more operational level, this is something that is really difficult to prove, that you're working on this, but however, on an ecosystem level, you can. And we're focusing on the dynamics, the habitats, and the connections. Most importantly, this is on gradual transitions from land to water, because we as the Dutch have been really well in managing our water systems, resulting in a lot of dikes, a lot of dams, a lot of sluices, and a lot of hard transitions between land and water. And when we all, as ecologists especially, know that a large part of our biodiversity and ecosystem is in the gradual transition from land to water. So we want to improve this in the whole large program. So now we're going to focus a little bit. We're going to main goals, and now we're just focusing. Earlier on, we worked on the whole of the Netherlands. So these are the rivers, the large lakes, the sea, or the Waddenzee, and the estuarine areas of the rivers. Now we're just focusing on the river system. And for the river system, we want a richly living river landscape of free flowing and regulated rivers with a natural variation in water levels, flow velocities as its driving force. Again, generic, but on this level, we still need a generic goal. Everybody should agree with it, more or less. But we tried to give a little bit more insight into what kind of measures, what kind of structural interventions on a system scale we are thinking about. So we want, and now we're returning to the dynamic processes, habitats, and connections. And then we wanted to give the river more space. So the floodplains should be inundated more. Dynamic processes in the river should increase. We want hotspots of large habitats on several areas. And we want a connection between those hotspots. And the river should be a continual corridor. And finally, the connection with the large lake systems and the sea over here should be well developed. So we're getting a theme in our goals, but we're still quite generic. Now we're zooming in. So one of the hotspots is Gelderse. It's over here. So this is the place where the Rhine River enters the Netherlands. And it splits in 3 rivers, the Waal to the south, the Nederrijn in the middle, and the IJssel to the north. Again. And for the Gelderse Poort specifically, again, we're focusing on dynamic processes. So we want to restore the connection between the riverbed, the summer bed of the river and its floodplains. So more frequent and prolonged inundations, because we see that the river stays in the main channel for 90% of the time. So floodplains only 10% of the time inundate, which is not enough. We want more room for sedimentation and erosion. We want more stable communities of species, and we want to sustainably achieve Water Framework Directive objectives and Natura 2000 objectives. And finally, we want to strengthen the relationship of the river system with its surrounding embanked areas. All the while, when implementing these interventions, we want to consider the river's DNA. This is something that that was developed in the Netherlands, where we're looking, where we described of the different river system, or the different parts of the river, what the characteristics are, because the IJssel is a really different river from the Waal. So we have this called the river's DNA, where for each part of the river, there's a description of what is suitable in this kind of areas. Considering the shape, the scale, and the dimensions of the appropriate natural systems. Now we're going to the measure-specific goals. So now we have a specific floodplain. This is the Roswaard. This is a floodplain along the Pannerden's Canal, which is part of the Rhine River. And we were able to acquire this floodplain. Right now it's in mostly agricultural use, and we want to get this as part of the Gelder support project. And for this area, we want an expansion of the alluvial forests. This specific floodplain has a really high summer dike. So the winter dike is over here. That never floods. The summer dike hardly ever floods. It can flood, but it doesn't in this case. In this case, the summer dike is almost as high as the winter dike, resulting in a floodplain that hardly ever inundates. But this also gives room for the development of forests, as it is hardly a part of the flow of the river. So that's what we're focusing on. We want more alluvial forests, and we want a more varied landscape with high and low gradients. So this again, see the theme, we want habitats. And from the habitats, and we want the dynamic processes, so we want more hydrodynamic, so more influx of river seepage water, and a more direct exchange of water with the Penedès Canal. And these interventions should lead to a substantial development and expansions of habitats such as alluvial forest, natural grasslands, and floodplains. So now we have our measure-specific goals. But once you go to the operational level, this is not good enough. Because in a discussion, you will get discussions on how much alluvial forests exactly do you need and how much water interaction is exactly needed. How much extra digging is needed. On an ecological level, maybe money is a constraint, but on an ecological level, how much do you want? So for an operational level, you need to go a little bit deeper for your goal setting. For Gelder support, at the moment, we're trying to get to that point, but we're not there yet. So I'm going to use a different project that I'm working on of the Water Framework Directive, where we have these operational goals. So operational goals, then I have to tell you a little bit more about operational goals, because for practical implementation, a vague goal such as I want a habitat for fish or I want a forest, they must be translated in more specific design relevant criteria. So civil engineers, they can't work with these ecological vague goals. They need specific goals like what flow velocity is needed, how deep should I excavate, how deep is the water, is shallow water 10 centimeters, is it a meter, is it 10 meters, what is shallow water? Because a term like shallow water is not enough. So you need preferred substrate, all these kinds of requirements allow engineers to understand the ecological needs in terms that they can work with, and instead of using something like this must be good for species A, the requirements becomes the flow velocity must exceed 0.5 meter per second in the period of March to June when this fish is spawning. So and you can use indicator species as a great way to getting to these operational goals. We know at which flow velocity certain species spawn, and we can check whether or not a certain kind of design will result in these flow velocities during spawning. And the same can be said, example, for the minimum area of a forest or of reed vegetation. For example, the great reed warbler, one pair of great reed warblers need 20 hectares of well-developed reed vegetation. So if we're putting that as a goal for our project, we need at least 20 hectares. If we go any less, it's not good enough. So this can help in getting to the final design of your measures and showing when a trade-off is too much. Diving deeper into this is an example of a model calibration of flow velocity. You see the main channel of the river and a side channel that we're developing for the Water Framework Directive. In the side channel, we see much lower flow velocities than in the main channel, but in the main channel, the habitat is not, there's a lot of shipping, so there's a lot of disturbance. So we need the side channel for better habitat, but when is the flow velocity good enough? Because we have the side channel for rheophilic fish, so fish that prefer flowing waters. However, when we increase the flow, the redirection of the water through the side channel, this has negative impact on the shipping capabilities in the main channel. So shipping will say we do not want any water to the side channel, or just really a little bit. And from an ecological perspective, we can say, well, this is the point at which it's not good enough anymore. So suppose the ecological target is a flow velocity of 0.2 meters on average conditions. If it turns out to be only 1.5 or 0.15 meters per second, is that a problem? Yes or no? Possibly not, but you can help. This can help in getting the right conversation and trade-off within the project, and understand the ecological relevance of these thresholds. So it's again, it's nature. It's never black and white, but it can help in getting the right conversations with other stakeholders or other functions around your project, and showing, well, if I go any lower than this, if I compromise even more, my habitat is not good enough. And this can result in tables like this, because you don't want to use just one species, you want several species. This is just a small part of the whole, but you can show that you need a certain habitat, a certain depth, a certain flow velocity, and you can test whether or not a certain kind of design, whether or not it corresponds with these species requirements. And especially when you use this over several measures, it can become a really strong help in showing that maybe you're compromising too much on certain species. It's not a problem if you're not creating river lamprey habitat in every measure you're taking, because river lamprey, that's the rivierprik in Dutch, needs quite a high flow velocity. So that's really difficult to achieve. However, if every project you're doing along the river doesn't get to these flow velocities, maybe there is a problem. So this can help in getting this more clear and showing that maybe you're compromising too much, or there is a little bit more to compromise. Summarizing, a project can and should have goals on different levels, and the goals should be connected to one another, I think. And this can help in getting from a vision to an implementation strategy, but it can also show how ecology and engineering are connected, and it shows local, it connects local to a global level and vice versa. So well-formed goals create scalable, measurable, and inspiring nature-based solutions, hopefully. And I saw some questions coming in. I don't know if I need to answer these right away. I see, Sarah, you have to, who decides on the compromises for species specifications? Well, that's difficult, because it's, I think that's a conversation you're having with one another. So you have the conversation on, it can help in showing, okay, if I'm compromising too much, this is the effect, and I will not achieve the goals we've set. Do we want to compromise this far? Is it still worth going through with this project, or should we stop here? I think it's a shared responsibility. And finally, you have you can show to the policymakers, well, we can keep on going with this project, but not in this way. So you can make it more clearly that maybe you need more. Let's see. Because this is indeed the time for questions. And while we're answering questions, you can already go to the Menti, because we have some, after we've answered the questions, we have a Menti to go into this a little bit further altogether.
Yeah, we have a question from Jeroen, Rosalie.
Yes.
And when everybody is joining the Menti, we can go into a few questions indeed.
Yes. Jeroen, does PRGW make a distinction between design objective and maintenance objective? In other words, how do you allow for unforeseen natural dynamics in time? I think this is part of a good. Right now, we're making the distinction on the different levels, so we're trying to make goals on different levels of the project. And a part of the analysis is how do we go with how do we work with, for example, climate change, and how can we anticipate, that's the word I was looking for, anticipate on climate change, because I think that's a large part of unforeseen natural dynamics that we'll see in time. So I think right now it's not an explicit part of the goals, but it implicitly it is. Does that answer your question, Jeroen? I know it's a little bit vague, but
gives an impression. Thanks.
Marty, you also have a question?
Yeah, you have this nice table with the special needs per species. Do you also have an overview of species that have similar wishes, and which species need extra care because they fall off if you make it a similar environment?
Well, what you'll see is that almost all species have overlapping requirements. One on the hand, one on the other hand. So there's a lot of overlap within these requirements, and yet there's still quite a lot of distinction, because so you always need the combination of all the species to get the whole view, because again, it's ecology, it's not binary, so you need the whole overview. And the problem is that if you have flow velocity that's good enough, but your habitat is not good enough, then it's still not good for, it's not a good habitat for for a certain species. So you always need a combination of requirements to get the whole picture. So for if a certain species has like 3 or 5 requirements, it's one out, all out, because it needs all 5 in order to survive.
Ralph also has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Rosalie, for a very interesting and clear presentation. I was a bit intrigued by one of your slides in which it said celebrate achievements.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with that, but I was wondering if that effect is measurable, in the sense that I mean, normally these kind of things, they pop up and then just fade away very rapidly. So do you indeed, how can you make use of that to the max?
Well, I think it's a two-way street. It has 2 parts. First of all, celebrate the achievements and do not be afraid to let it disappear again. the next project will come along and will celebrate that achievement. So celebrate the achievements when you can, but when you're setting with goal setting like this, especially with the operational goals at the end, you can, if you have like a whole array of different measures and you have the goal setting and evaluation on these goals on for every single measure, at the end of the program or halfway through the program, you can show, okay, we've made great habitat for these species, and maybe these species need a little bit more attention, or these kind of requirements. We still have a lot of stagnant waters, but not enough flowing waters. So then you can use it as also to celebrate on a program level and show on a program level what you've achieved for a whole array of measures. So I think for it can also help in the long run.
Yeah, I understand, but I was also thinking about, I mean, having, for instance, published this work in National Geographic, as you show as an example, that would be wonderful, of course. But then, would it help if you wave with that at your stakeholders and say, look, we already have this attention, so it is very important that you participate? Mm-hmm. Or is it something that you cannot use for that?
I think that yes, you can absolutely use it for that. You should use it for that. What we see, but that's a whole different point. But what we see, what I see in a lot of projects is nature conservation projects work best when there's a team of people who are enthusiastic, who want to achieve it, who want to acknowledge and show and tell everybody that how wonderful it is that they're working on, in order to get enthusiasm with other people to achieve the same. So get spin-off. And that's something that we really have to keep in mind, that a good story sells, and a good story and nice pictures and somebody who is enthusiastically telling about nature conservation is essential for getting more attention to nature conservation.
Okay, keep that in mind. Thanks.